In the year 1970, women's rights were making slow but steady progress, driven by the relentless efforts of activists and organizations advocating for change. The National Organization for Women, NOW, emerged as a response to the failures of polite, ignored requests in the 1960s, determined to challenge the sexist attitudes embedded in radical politics. Founded as a national pressure group, NOW fought to push forward critical initiatives for women and demand recognition. While exploring archival records, I found myself drawn into this rabbit hole, beginning with the correspondence between Pittsburgh chapter president of NOW, Joanne Gardner, and the candidates of the House of Representatives, specifically Gerald Kaufman and Milton Chapp. The letters were discussing their respective stances regarding reproductive rights and the petitions that were being submitted by NOW chapters across the country. Women have historically fought for their rights and made significant progress, but the struggle for full equality was and is still far from over. In 1972, the law Title IX was passed prohibiting sex discrimination in federally funded education programs. The Supreme Court also overturned laws to allow access to contraception for all women. In 1973, with Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court legalized abortion in the first trimester and struck down many state restrictions on abortions in the U.S. In 1975, the Equal Pay Act was enforced that made it illegal to discriminate in pay and benefits based on sex. Policies were also put in place to ban sexual harassment in the workplace. Unfortunately, that brings me back to the reality of some 50 years later. Back to the current day of 2025, where Trump's policies, especially through his Project 2025 agenda, have systematically undermined women's access to healthcare, workplace protections, and overall equality with the swift stroke of a pen. He has restricted reproductive rights through legislation, judicial appointments, and funding cuts. For instance, a global gag order on organizations that provide abortion services with the threat of funding cuts, or even just having gone further to restrict abortion than any president since the original Roe decision in 1973. By rolling back anti discrimination measures and workplace protections and significantly reducing federal workers and funding for things like housing and health insurance, he has made it increasingly difficult for women to thrive in their careers, education, and personal lives. His administration has pushed women's rights backward, echoing these same struggles of the 1960s, and continues to accelerate this regression. It's disheartening, it's scary, and it's enraging. How the hell did we get here? We are living in a nightmare disguised as progress. A time where our grandmothers' battles are now our own, and the chains they shattered are being reforged before our eyes. Women's autonomy is hanging by a thread, and if we do nothing, history will not just repeat itself, it will consume us, dragging us back to a past where we were seen but never heard, used but never valued. The question is no longer if they will try to control us, it's if we will let them. Here, amazingly, you will see my 2025 letter alongside Joanne Gardner's 1970 letter, both addressed to a member of the House of Representatives, expressing our fears and outrage over the state of women's rights and reproductive freedoms. Clearly, complacency remains a dangerous risk. The fight is only intensifying, and the opposition is preparing for battle with the upper hand. If we do not push back now, future generations of women will bear the consequences. This underscores the vital role of historical awareness in activism, how failing to acknowledge past struggles allows oppression to resurface. As Winston Churchill famously said, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We must embrace discomfort, stand together, and unite our strengths to fight not only for our own rights, but for the future of all women to come. Physically holding and reading these letters and petitions from the archives ignited a deep rage, as the striking similarities between past and present struggles for women highlighted the urgency for action and fueled my passion for change. Thanks for coming down my rabbit hole with me.